who speak Nepali. I've got a lot of friends who are ex-Gorkhas, daughters and sons that we regularly talk to, and I'll often even try to talk to them. We try to talk in Nepali. It doesn't always go very well because we're always like, "What's that word? What's that word?" I'd give it a good 60-40 split. I'm British as well, 100%, born and raised here, no doubt. But first and foremost, I am Nepali, and that will always show. Before I say I am British, I am a Nepali person.
Wonderful. Thank you for that perspective. Next, Prakriti, would
Um,
you like to go on your take?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So my experiences are kind of different. Unlike Simona and Eric, I grew up in Nepal. So I was 18 when I left Nepal, and I've been living in the US for about 4 years now. So I mean, I acknowledge that I had the privilege of being able to grow up in a community where I didn't have to feel like I didn't belong, because like most of the people looked like me. Um, so for me, like the language, food, religion, culture, a lot of that was already there. And I didn't have to struggle with these aspects. I'm fluent in Nepali. Like I grew up eating all of the stereotypical Nepali foods, all of that. But I think for me, what being Nepali has grown, this idea has changed for me in the past couple of years, is like acknowledging that there's so much diversity in Nepal. So अहिले चाहिँ, when you think of the mainstream Nepali person, especially when you see things on Facebook or like all the Nepali platforms, you see that Nepal, for a lot of people, I think Nepali is like this idea of this like person who lives in Kathmandu, probably like a middle class, upper caste person, who can speak Nepali and English fluently, who grew up speaking in Nepali at home. So there's that idea. But for me, Nepal is so much more diverse. And for me, being Nepali is like embracing that shared identity, which is not a singular identity at all. Because Nepali people are, yeah, like there are people just like me who grew up in Nepal, who they're fluent in Nepali, grew up speaking Nepali, but there are also people who live in who live in villages in the hilly regions, or somewhere in Tarai or in Pahad, for whom their mother tongue comes first. And there may be like Gurung Basa or Tamang, or there's like so many other languages. And I know people whose parents they don't speak Nepali at all, because in their community they always only talked in their own mother tongue. And for them, they're actually more comfortable in their mother tongue, like whatever they may be, like Maithili, Bhojpuri, Gurung, whatever. And they're more comfortable in that than they are in Nepali. Um, so for me, being Nepali is also about acknowledging that there is all that diversity, which is not always reflected in the mainstream media for Nepal. Um, and like acknowledging that Nepal has its own issues with that, and still, like saying that, like I acknowledge and I'm trying to learn about both the good and bad aspects of that. And also, like one thing this reminds me is that I have this friend, and she's American. And usle bhanthe ke, like she's Chinese American, and she used to say, oh, like with Chinese people of Chinese heritage, like I can kind of tell that they're Chinese, or like Korean, or like some other heritage. I can kind of tell that they are Korean or Chinese or whatever. But with Nepali people, there's like एउटा Nepali face नै छैन भन्थे के. And that is something I also feel kind of represents Nepaliness, because we can look very South Asian, or like we can look like very stereotypically East Asian, or we can pass as like being from so many different cultures, and like that also speaks for the diversity of Nepal itself. And so again, like I guess to like wrap my answer, I'd say like for me, being Nepali is just like, again, embracing that shared identity, which is not a singular identity at all by any means.
Wonderful, Prakriti. I loved your answer because I think you brought a lot of really important points there. Sometimes when we have a very different perspective of who we are when we step outside of uh, that environment where we grow up. When we are in that environment, we take a lot of things for granted. Especially when you come from Kathmandu Valley, you tend to identify yourself, see Nepali as the valley people, like you said. But when you come outside of it, you see Nepal as a whole, and then you realize there is so much more to Nepal, and this how much of the socioeconomic uh, people who have socioeconomic predominance kind of um, use that voice, as asserting their Nepali identity, right? What that means. But when you step outside of Nepal, then you realize meaning Nepali, the identity of Nepali person has much broader meaning to it. And also when you said that the faces of Nepali people, we are ethnically and not just linguistically diverse. We have, racially diverse culture as well. So, and we're not easily identified as a Nepali person. When I walk around, people don't identify me as a Nepali person. So that diversity itself, is our identity as well, I guess. So that makes it even, although it is a wonderful thing, it makes it a little more difficult from a preservation perspective, right? How do you, when you come outside of Nepal, how do you then preserve if we don't have a uniform identity, right? So something that to keep in mind. And our national anthem itself, right? It asserts so much on diversity, but when we look at our culture programs and all that, I think we need to be a little bit more mindful of also integrating that diverseness in our society. So next, Arnav, I would like to get your thoughts on what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in the same boat as Prakriti because I grew up in Nepal and then I came here for my undergrad. And when I was back there, it was all for granted. Like it's not like I was not gonna hear people not speak Nepali. I can just go anywhere and just eat Nepali food and all that. So it's pretty much granted. And like, what was the change for me was when I came here and I saw all this different culture and then different ways of doing things. Even like when you go to grocery, there's like different systems and all that. And especially like the right and the left lane, it's all different. So like that's what. And then I went back one summer and I was like, yeah, this is where I'm from. And like it was like a sense of realization. Like I am a Nepali, and then like that's I guess how it's shaped my perspective about what being in Nepali is. It actually formed after I left Nepal, and then it's amazing because like you I guess it's so easy to miss all those things when you're just like in that bubble, but like when you're just out of it and then you start to like realize things and you're like, oh, let's celebrate this festival, let's eat this food. I'm here, and then my mom's like cooking for me and I'm like, yeah, how do I cook this? So all those aspects is like, it's like, especially because like back home you have the same vacation, you have vacations based on festivals, but like for here it's like the say always falls on like a midterm exam, and then it's kind of hard to like what I mean, like integrate that with your time schedule, and like there's like time difference and all that. So it's very interesting, and like I feel like I'm growing every day, but like at the same time I've come to a realization that being Nepali is more than just being in Nepal, and then so that's how my perspective has been shaped in these recent years.
Thank you, Arnav. Yes, very, very true. We take a lot for granted when we're in Nepal. You don't have to work hard on preserving that culture, or you take it for granted when you come outside. All those things that you took for granted now is not part of the culture. You have to really work hard in preserving that, or even to experience something that happened just naturally in Nepal, just being there in that environment now is not available to you. So you probably need to seek out your own community here, people with a similar background. So you have to make an effort to preserve that, to even to experience that, what you experience back home. Wonderful point. And Deepta, what's your thought on it?
So for me, I was born in Nepal, but I came here when I was very young. So I basically grew up here. In my case, I think I'm quite privileged in the sense that we have quite a big Nepali community around us. So even though like in primary school, I was like the only Nepalese person there, I still had a community outside of school, which always taught me and kind of like kept me in tie with my own heritage, which I'm very, very grateful for. And I know that a lot of people aren't able to be in like close contact with Nepalese culture like that. But I think like Prakriti said, it was just, for me, it's like learning I'm like taking it upon myself to learn more about my like background, learn more about Nepal, and yeah, just like immersify myself in the culture.
Very good. Thank you for the wonderful answer. So I would like, this forum to be kind of open discussion as well. So bring forward any questions or any kind of challenges that you've faced, being a Nepali. What are the things that you have experienced in trying to preserve your culture? Are there any, and what kind of help have you got from your local community? Is there one? If not, what does that mean to you? How do you then keep in touch with your own heritage? So let's just kind of keep it like an open forum, and just kind of ask each other questions and share our experiences. And what does it mean, like when you meet other people, when you introduce yourself, how do other people receive you as a Nepali person? What kind of questions do they ask you, or interest they show? We identify ourselves as a Nepali, and we place value on certain things, let's say language. But for other people, when they come to know of your culture, a lot of people show interest in something that you probably do not value as much, like, for example, trekking or spiritual quest. There are people who go to Nepal for different reasons, and for us, Nepal, we value Nepali culture for different reasons. So I would like to just and for people who grow up here, I also would like to understand your perspective on what that means when you meet other people and you introduce yourself as a person with Nepali heritage. What kind of experiences have you had, and how do you, sorry, it's a loaded question, how does your identity shape based on that as well?
So for me, I grew up in an area that was, in most of my life, very Asian dominant. There was a lot of Indian people, a lot of Chinese people in the area I lived, and that only made it a little bit harder for me to stand out as Nepali, because I have darker skin. A lot of people confuse me with being Indian, and I was just lumped in, that group. Oh, she's just Indian. She has, Indian backgrounds. And it was always a point of me that I became more proud in being Nepali, that I was different from them. I like, look, I'm not Indian. Nepal is a whole different country. We have our own language, our own culture. I'm different. And in a way that has actually helped me be more proud of being Nepali, because I'm not like Indian people. It's a whole different country. So in that way, when a lot of people come up to me and ask where I'm from, I know that they assume sometimes that I'm Indian, or a lot of the times people don't even know what Nepal is. They don't even know where it is on a map, and I'll have to explain to them, it's below China, it's where Mount Everest is. And because Nepal is such a small country, I have learned that a lot of people don't know about it. And as a Nepali person, I feel it's my responsibility to educate them and say, hey, look, I might be the first Nepali person you meet. I may be the only Nepali person you meet, but Nepal is a country. We have our own, type of people, culture, and everything. Let me tell you about it. So I've definitely faced challenges with representing who I am as a Nepali person, but like, with coming from a smaller country, those challenges exist. And just the fact that I've been able to be more comfortable in my Nepali identity has made me proud, because again, there are some other people I know who are Nepali, who are from the same town I am from, and they haven't had the opportunity to go back and learn about Nepali culture. And as a result, they've become a little bit more Americanized, and they might not be as proud. They might not understand what it means to be Nepali. And sometimes I do feel bad. I want to reach out and say, hey, look, you are from this beautiful country. Do you know what that means to you? And I've gotten the opportunity to understand what that means to me. And because of that, I've been more proud. But there are other people who are Nepali who don't know what it means. And it's hard, because growing up in America, you have to bridge the gap between being American and being Nepali. And who do you say you're American? Do you say you're Nepali? And I've had the privilege of understanding that I am Nepali before anything else. Yes, I grew up in America. Yes, I'm American as well, but I am Nepali first. And so that's always whenever people ask me where I'm from, I say Nepali first. There's no doubt. I never say, oh, I'm American. Yes, I am American, but first of all, I'm Nepali. So
very interesting. When we live in a culture which is so multicultural, people come from all over the world. I think it's wonderful thing in US, and as I'm sure in UK as well, that we can proudly assert our ethnicity and our tradition and our heritage. And you're right. When we introduce ourselves, a lot of people assume Nepal is, another extension of India, and that allows us to assert our identity even more. And Nepal is unique in its own way, its history, culture, and I think that makes us proud of who we are, as you said, and every time, like my personal experiences, because I'm married to an Indian person, when we meet a new person and we introduce ourselves, somehow when he introduces himself as an Indian, we don't get as much excitement out of them. But when I introduce myself as a Nepali, they have so much questions, because chances are they haven't met another Nepali person in their life. So, the Mount Everest, Lord Buddha, we have so much to be proud of, right? And I think that also puts a little bit of pressure on us, especially when, Lord Buddha is something that represents our culture. And Gurkhas, is what represents our culture, because I think people kind of expect, or maybe we put that expectation on ourselves, that we need to emulate that, similar mindset and personalities. So good that you brought that up. Eric, what's your take on it?
Simona, can I just ask one quick question? Where are you from in the States?
I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's what. So a lot of people are a bit more, I want to say, less educated there than, for example, California, New York, in terms of geography.
I mean, they're still, the area that I grew up in is very educated. I would say it's a lot of immigrants have come and settled in Charlotte. So there's a big Indian community, Asian community in where I live specifically. So they are all educated, their parents push them to be doctors, lawyers. So they're all, living in big
but
houses.
educated within, like, for example, knowing Nepali culture. Because I imagine the Indians know what Nepali people, but I imagine, for example, the white community of North Carolina aren't very well versed on knowing where Nepal is, for example.
No, they don't.
So that's a big, that's a big juxtaposition to the UK, actually, because a lot of people in the UK have a very, at least a decent knowledge of Nepal, simply because of the Gorkhas, simply because of people like Joanna Lumley, and because they know, the Queen is always flanked by 2 Gorkha guards whenever she's going to a public appointment. They do, even if they may not know much about Asian culture or respect it much, they do have a kind of weird affection for Gorkhas, which I understand why. So in the UK, we get a bit more love towards us. There are predominantly, like, there's still some issues in places like Aldershot, which is a very predominantly large Nepali community. There is still a bit of irksome between, like, Nepali people and, for example, the locals. But within London, within the big cities, we get a lot of respect. People that don't know, you get the usual stereotypical questions. Oh, you're from where Mount Everest is, have you climbed it? The classic, the usual question. What else is there? Yaks, all these kind of things. And for me, again, I repeat this from before, it gets even more confusing because I'm not from Nepal. So I'll ask them, do you drink tea? Have you heard of Darjeeling? I'm from Darjeeling. Okay, I'm Nepalese, but I'm from India. It gets even more confusing. But yeah, like, I haven't faced much. Luckily, I've never been racially abused in the UK, be it towards being Nepali or be it towards being Asian at all. I'm sure that tons of people have been, but I have never experienced it. But then again, I've been born and raised in London, where it's a huge multicultural community. My grands came here from India in the 60s, and there's been a big Nepali community from the 70s, 80s, 90s onwards. So yeah, people know about us. People definitely know about us. It's more often than not that they know about us, and they already know some stuff. They know about Gorkhas. They know about a lot of people know about Momon because of Nepali restaurants. And whenever someone wants to learn more about my culture, the first thing I do is take them to a Nepali restaurant because our food is good, man. Momo, aloo dum, puri, all these things. but yeah, that's just my take on it. Luckily in the UK, it's not too bad. In the bigger cities, you go further out, they won't know as much because there is a big, similar to I imagine most countries, like the countryside is very, very countryside here. They're very in their own bubbles. They tend to be, which again, it's not their fault. And again, with the knowledge of Nepali community in the worldwide like system or so, we're not a very big country. We don't really stand out much. So I don't expect people to know, but I'm happy when they ask. And most of the time they're very open-minded about asking. So that's my take on it, I would say.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think US as a whole, UK, relatively, I think it's a more densely, populated country.
It's a much smaller country as well, yeah.
And the fact that UK has, it's an imperial culture. It has, ruled all over the world. I think that tends to make people British a little more culturally aware about the world than Americans do. But I think Americans are, although they may not be as aware of the cultures around the world, they are very curious. At the same time, they're also accepting, and because we also have the similar diversity as UK,
Yeah.
I think, and not knowing actually opens up the door. A lot of times, when like people know, they assume a lot about you, and and their assumption kind of shapes who you think they are, and then doesn't allow you to kind of assert your identity in a way that you would like. And I think that being in US, being not as aware about the work culture, I think it allows us to kind of shape our own identity the way we would like. So, and I think in US, I feel that part of the world, people assume it to be more spiritual part of the world, and and they automatically assume a person from Nepal would be spiritual as well, which so which I feel is a huge compliment. And so I completely agree with your point on how UK, you may not have to assert your identity as much as people in the US, but it may not necessarily be. I wouldn't take it negatively when people ask, about our.
Oh no, not at all. Not negatively. Not at all.
Yeah, it's a welcome thing because it allows us to open and have a dialogue. So wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Prakriti?
Yeah, so okay, for me, because the college that I live in, it's a liberal arts, it's like an ultra liberal, ultra progressive kind of space here, and so no one has ever assumed anything about me. They always ask me where I'm from first. I think there was this one time somewhere outside where I was like walking somewhere, and someone just like in the middle of like, they didn't even say hi or anything. They just stopped me in the middle and they said like, which part of India are you from? And that was like the first question they asked, and I was like, I politely told them that I'm from Nepal. But I think like apart from that, no one's ever like even assumed anything about me. They're pretty respectful, but I don't know, maybe once I get out of this community, once I move somewhere else, once I get a job somewhere else, that might change. And so maybe I think it's because of that I feel like I haven't had to fight too much to feel Nepali, or I mean also because I grew up in Nepal, so like I've like been very secure about my identity, which again is a privilege I recognize. So yeah, like when I was in Nepal, or like even after coming here, I've always had Nepali friends and I've never had to think too much about being a Nepali person. But because after coming to the US, I see a lot of other cultures as well. I see people of different races and ethnicities. So I do feel like I want to try and be more close to the culture, because I see all these other people embracing their own languages and heritage. So like sometimes as a challenge, like me and my friends will try to have a whole conversation 100% in Nepali, which like even as a person who grew up in Nepal is really difficult. English is pretty, especially Kathmandu, where I grew up, English is used quite a bit. And so we use English words even while we're speaking in Nepali, even with our friends back in Nepal, or even with our parents. So that's kind of a challenge in itself. I guess that's like one way it's changed me, the experience that I've had. That's one way I'm I'm trying to embrace my culture, I think. But I think just like without also just not talking about my personal experiences, but the experiences of people I've seen. I've seen some Nepali Americans who grew up here, and this might not be the experience of the people in the other speakers here, but I've seen some Nepali Americans who grew up here and then they've had bad experiences with Nepali people. Like they've had bad experiences when they went back to Nepal because, you know, they were kind of seen as, oh, like they're American, you're not fully Nepali. And so I've seen some people, it kind of drove them away. Like they don't want to be associated with Nepali people because they just feel like, oh, like Nepali people are just going to stereotype me. They're just going to like not look at me as fully Nepali. So like I've seen certain Nepali people be affected in that way. Like, yeah, but for me, it's never affected me negatively, I would say. And in certain sense, once I came out of Nepal, I saw all these different cultures. Here, a lot of Asian cultures with whom we have similar but not exactly same cultural identities, and like I've kind of learned how to juxtapose our culture with theirs and see what's similar, what's different. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. That actually reminds me of something. So, you know, when we have our local gatherings here, there is a trend. Usually what I see is the older generation, people who are well acclimated, who have, you know, come from Nepal, they are much more excited about, you know, doing these, our cultural, you know, singing and dancing. And that's our basically way of entertaining ourselves whenever we gather together, right? Nepalese, that's our big part of our culture. But what I see is the younger generation who grow up do not take as, you know, part in these activities as much. They form their own you know, group, like they will be playing video games or watching, you know, some American games, while the adults are, you know, doing more Nepali oriented activities. And I would like to you know, ask you guys also. I know Arnav and Deepta haven't, you know, expressed, you know, their point of view on this critical question, but just as a dialogue, you know, do you particularly feel, especially those who have grown up here, that you kind of feel left out a little bit when we have these community gatherings? And are there kind of some kind of activities that you would suggest would be helpful in bringing these group of people as an integral part of these activities? You know, I know Arnav probably will not be able to say much in that. Arnav, you can take the earlier questions, or we can, you know, have this dialogue going further the next round.
For me, it's more about, I guess, how I manage my time around, you know, just being a college student. It's kind of hard because like I live with like American people, and then so if I want to do something, I have to reach out to the Nepali people here. It's mainly like graduate students and like PhD students, and then it's kind of hard to like, you know, like accommodate to like everyone's time schedule and everything, and that's definitely a big challenge, you know, like to like preserve, I guess, the culture. I don't know, maybe mainly the festivals, I guess, but we still try to do something, you know, during the weekend. Let's say like pre-COVID, we had this gathering for Dasai and just like hang out, just cook food. So I guess there's challenges as well, but at the same time, I feel like just need to go a little bit more, you know, just like a little bit out of the comfort zone to like, you know, reach out. And then I guess for me, it's been like just I try to like, you know, do it because like no one's gonna come at me and be like, yeah, you gotta be there all the time, but like they're gonna reach out to me, but like I have to also put that effort into it, you know. So it's definitely a challenge as well. At the same time, it's like I guess you get that feel of being back home, which is always nice, you know, especially with like how stressful college can be, and like, you know. So yeah, I feel like if I go that extra bit, I'm usually involved in some way or the other, you know, trying to like preserve my identity. But like as Berkeley said, like it's always been like very secure for me, you know, like I've never identified myself anything other than just Nepali because I've been there for almost like most of my life, you know. So it's been very easy and it's a privilege, definitely. And about your second question, I feel like there's nothing really that like we do especially, but we just like hang out, listen to Nepali music. I don't know, yeah, just watch some videos. There's always like funny movies up there. You could always like with big group bunches, always good to watch movies, I guess. I mean, that's been my experience. So I guess the small things matter, when you're like not back home, and then it kind of feels like you kind of feel wholesome when you're like doing these small things and you enjoy, like you're like sometimes escape from like where you're living and then where you're from, I guess, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So Arnav, I from what I hear, you live in a place or university where they're not a big Nepali community, sounds like, right? So you've had to make an effort to experience that part, and something like movies and those kind of things kind of help you put in touch with your Nepali identity, from what I hear.
Yeah, something of sorts. It's mainly because I mean we have like about 20, I guess. It's not big, but like like it's a college town, so it's very just like it's mainly students here. So among students, like there's someone older, and then they usually invite us and all that. So even though we're here, like everyone's gonna be busy with their own lives, right? So it's very hard to like set a time. Let's say like we can't just be like, oh, let's all meet tomorrow and then do it, right? Because like I mean, it's a bit more difficult. So I feel like you got to bring that subject on, and then there's gonna be, I guess, people are gonna be like, yeah, I'm free here, and then that's how we decide. So definitely, there's like a lot more. You gotta like put an effort into it, as you say, yeah. But when we put it, I think we usually meet up like at least once a semester, which is always nice.
Good. Glad to know at least there's some activities around you to keep in touch with your Nepali side. But that's why with the facilities like Zoom and all that, we could hopefully we'll be able to bring together more activities, community activities and programs online, so that folks because Nepalis are little in number. In big cities there may be where we can bring in activities in huge numbers, but in small places, I come from Delaware, and we also face that challenge where now we have more people, Nepali communities growing there, but in the past we were just 20 people. So sometimes it's harder to preserve your culture when your community is that small, but with maybe hopefully Drishtikone, that's part of our goal, is to bring such activities like this forum, where we can voice ourselves, get involved, even if we can't in person, we can do it online now. I think that will help us further our cause. And you're welcome to be part of it. Dipta?
So like I said before, obviously we have a very big, we're in London, the southeast, like in Kent, we have a very big Nepalese society. And even though I was like the only like Asian kid in school, there were like issues with certain kind of bullying when I was a kid. Just like how kids are, like they'll just bully each other. And that did have an effect on me then, but I was always like, no, I'm Nepalese, like it doesn't matter, I'm Nepalese kind of thing, right? And in terms of like, so I grew up around a lot of other people of color. So a lot of us are like first generation, second generation immigrants. So we all kind of learned to accept our differences and just kind of vibe together, So with that, once again, I have a privilege in being able to have that sort of background as well. In terms of we're a lot of people, we have quite a lot of, as I said, societies. So even like universities, there's always like at least one Nepalese society. From my university, because obviously I'm only in first year and coronavirus has kind of made it a bit difficult to be at campus all the time. We haven't really been able to meet up, but I know that there was a lot of like Zoom sessions where people couldn't go home for thusly because of like lockdown and things like that. They did like this little Zoom for like all the Nepalese people, and there's just it's well, I'm lucky, I think, because there's quite a lot to do, even in like in London and Southeast area. A while back we had like Nepalese Youth Network, which is like where loads of like Nepalese like youths, like people, youngers would like basically there'd just be programs and things, and we like foods, just music, performance, that kind of thing. I think everyone kind of just finds it fun. We have a lot of like links, I guess you could say. So yeah.
So being from part of, a smaller community here in the US, where we do have a little bit of challenges in coming up with these programs and activities, I would like to ask, questions, especially to Deepta, Simona, and Eric. And what kind of activities that your communities provided to you as growing up that you, when you look back, as that has been the strongest part of helping you identify yourself as a Nepali, or to take pride in your Nepali identity and to connect yourself with that culture? What are the activities that you recommend, in local communities do for children that would help preserve your Nepali identity?
Yeah, so going back to the question you asked earlier, in Charlotte, where I grew up, there was a pretty large Nepali community, and there was always Nepali parties. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is a lot of the Nepali parents or older population, they, gather towards themselves, and then the children are just left. A lot of them, they have some Nepali friends, but they end up, going on their phones, playing games, and it's not really an inclusive community. And in part, it's both on the youth side and the adult side. I guess a solution or something that might ease that like drift is, including youth at the dinner table, like having the adults talk to the youth as well, because it's like at these Nepali parties, I'm sure the main purpose is you meet your friends, people who are, who speak Nepali, who are from Nepal. They can meet each other, and then their kids are kind of just there, and in that way their kids become friends with each other, and that is a way that Nepaliness has been kept alive. Like I have Nepali friends who are my age, and every time at Nepali parties we hang out and talk and stuff, but it's not like we're hanging out and experiencing Nepali culture. It's kind of, we're just hanging out because our parents are together and they're hanging out and they're having a Nepali party. But when that is kind of brought together, like when we have Nepali parties and it's this big celebration and the children are also involved, it's very nice. Like if we play like gambling games, like very like easy, like quarters or something, that way the kids can understand, oh, this is a part of Nepali culture in Nepal. This is what kids do on big festivals and big days like that. It's definitely hard because sometimes children are ignorant to learning about where they're from, or they're just like, oh, like my parents are going to this Nepali party, I have to tag along, whatever, I'll just sit on my phone. But slowly working together, we can like make that easier on the kids, and as a result, the kids will learn what it means to be Nepali living in America.
Thanks, Simona. It's definitely a challenge because it's not, that age is like, we all try to kind of identify ourselves separate from our parents, right? And if parents are Nepalese, you're trying to assert your Americanness probably a little more, I think going to college a little bit, your age group probably is a little more self-aware about their identity, but when you are 13, 14, 15, when your parents are trying to assert Nepali, identity upon you, you're probably rebelling, and that's what I find in a lot of young children when we ask, oh, let's dance on this music, or let's, can you show your Nepali music that you're practicing? They don't want to do that, so it's a little bit harder from parents to do that. But then I think, like you said, you keep asserting that, and they may rebel when they're young, but as they grow older, they will come to appreciate that, uniqueness in them. And when they go out in the world and, they find themselves so different from everybody else, that part of their identity probably will become much more valuable to them than when they were like 13, 14. So I think the point is to keep asserting that as parents.
Exactly. And just one thing is, where I'm at right now, my university in Greenville, North Carolina, there are no Nepalis here. Like I only have known one other Nepali professor, but now I'm here and everyone else in my university is mostly like a white dominated school. I'm like searching for people who are Nepali or, you know, Asian and trying to see it out. And I've like, now that I'm kind of left the area where I know more Nepalis, I'm like searching for people who I can relate to who are Nepali. And anytime if I see a name that sounds remotely Nepali, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe they're Nepali. Maybe I can talk to them. Maybe we can, you know, talk about being Nepali together or something like that. So definitely as you get older, I feel like you go through this process when you get older, when you're away from your parents, where you want to figure out who you are in your identity. Like you might go through this big identity crisis or a period of time where you're like, who am I? Am I American? Am I Nepali? And it's always a comfort knowing that you can always rely on your background and like where you came from. So
very true, very true. We all want to be unique, you know, and the fact that this is like a given thing, you know, free thing for us, and we latch onto that. I think so. As parents, in my case, when kids are at the age where I'm wondering if I'm doing the right thing, what have I done wrong that they don't want to identify themselves as a Nepali, of a Nepali heritage. But I think that is just a phase, and parents just need to keep asserting that those, you know, cultural values in them. And I think it's reassuring to hear that, you know, as a validation. So thank you for that. And Eric and Deepta, I know you're of a slightly different culture. What's your take on growing up when during, like, let's say early teenage, did you experience yourself trying to rebel against your Nepali heritage, you know, and you found yourself coming back to it later? And what kind of activities helped, you know, shape into?
Yeah, 100%. When I was told to go and learn how to read and write, I was not for it. I was 13 years old, going into GCSEs, and I was like, I've got much more important things to be doing than I can speak it. That's better than most of the kids that I know in my area. Like, why do I need to learn to read and write? And luckily, I stuck with it because I've come to, even when I was entering uni 21, 22, and I met Nepali people who didn't know how to read and write. I'm not even flexing on them. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing they don't. It's just, it helped me feel Nepali, as I said. I do. Back then, I, of course, didn't want to do it. You're a kid. You want instant gratification. You want to watch TV. You want to play football. You know, any of these things. But in the long run, you definitely want to assert that culture on you. I wasn't allowed to speak English at home when I was a kid because that was the only practice for Nepali that I got. At school, I have to speak English constantly. Church, I'm going to speaking Nepali. So I wouldn't get in trouble, but we, you know, like my parents would, and I also live with my grandparents as well. We would always speak Nepali at home, and because of that, I've always had curiosity. I think language is such an important thing because you can keep culture, but if a language dies in a culture, then where does that culture go? It's such an important. There are, you know, like tribes in the Amazon that have lost their culture because the last person that speaks their language has passed away, and that's hundreds, thousands of years of culture that already disappears. So I think teaching the kids the language when they're young is a very, very useful task, even if they won't relate to it directly later on. Because I was doing some research recently, and your language also shapes how you think. Because obviously a language is from a country, and that country has different opinions on a different country. So your brain will form completely different ideas on gender politics, on normal politics and economy, simply by the language we speak. For example, British is not a very English is not a very emotive language. We use very like precise words that describe it, but Nepali we say stuff like, you know, like garang gurung, which is like that's the sound that lightning makes. It's very emotive, you know. So yeah, growing up, I think it was a kind of pride for me that I was able to speak, read, and write my language and had some level of understanding of it more so than the others. So it was, in a weird way, people that didn't understand pushed me more to understand. Now I'm no, you know, like I don't know too much about my culture. I know festivals, I know like the language and stuff, but there's so much. And what I've also learned is everyone does it differently. No one does Dasai the same, no one does Diwali the same, Tikas, it's all kind of different. Then you've got the mixture in castes, and you've got even more of a breakdown. Newars are different to Tapas to Mogars. And I've been to London. The UK is really good. We have tons of belas. You have belas for every single caste. You have belas for where you are from in Nepal. We have belas for every single Gorkhali intake, different Gorkhali regiments. And if you pay attention at these things, you learn so much, because they're not just Nepali gatherings where people get together. Often you'll have someone leading the ceremonies. You'll have dancing. You'll have music. You'll have tombola, bingo, which surprisingly is really entertaining as a Nepali person. And I think one thing that the Nepali community in general, especially the older generation, but this is ingrained in their culture, and I know it's going to be hard to break, and it's only with our generation, the younger generation, that this will break. It's that we are very judgmental. Even like I say, I used to judge my friends for not being able to speak Nepali. It's not fair on them, because I don't know their upbringing. I don't know what they believe in, what they were like when they were kids. And when I was in Nepal once, we faced a bit of judgment for being from Darjeeling, and that was really weird, because like, bro, I'm Nepali. What do you mean? But our culture is in general, South Asian culture is very judgmental, I would say. And I think, like I said, as the next generation come up, us younger lot, we need to work on being able to accept people that are different, because I can't define how cultural I am to you. No, so you can't define how cultural that you are to me. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Only you can define your own culture. So if someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, you're not Nepali because you don't like Momo," tell them, "No, well, I have my own faith, I have my own values." It's only you can understand and feel how cultural you are. Yeah, that judgment is very difficult sometimes. It's hard to break. You get a lot of ideas about different people in the world that are bad just because your grandparents have told you, and you start growing up and realizing that no, that's not how it is. It's just, yeah, you definitely need to be we need to be more open as a group of people. And like, I even talk to my grandparents about this. They'll say something, Borgias, they're very old, they're in their 80s, and they'll say something as simple as like, "Oh, I don't want you to go outside at night, black people will hurt you." And it's like, where does this thought process come from? Why do you say that? "Oh, I read it in the news." But what do you think? And you slowly break down, be it this racial, be it this economic, even within our own castes, we have problems. You need to break those down to be accepting, because if you don't accept, the culture starts becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and it dies away. Sorry, that went off in a bit of a different.
No, I think you brought really wonderful points there. I know this program was only scheduled for an hour, but I think we just got started. Initially, it was just trying to get the, I don't know, jitters away or whatever. I am warming up to the topic, and I think we definitely need to have a second series. Eric, I would love to have you back, because I think you have 100%. Wonderful points to make. And I think we need to have these dialogues, because you're right. We are judgmental as a society. We have a certain, concept about what Nepali really means, being Nepali really means. To me, I grew up in Nepal, I married outside, I live in a different culture, language is an important part of our identity, but that is not the only part of our identity. Food is not the only part of our identity. My biggest part of me being a Nepali, the thing that I take pride is our spiritual culture. It has that is one unique thing it has to offer to the world, and our brave soldiers, right? I mean, we're an exemplary in so many ways, and language ties us together. Obviously, it's an important part of it, but if we get stuck on that, we may lose even more important valuable part of our heritage that I think we are also overlooking. And so in Drishtikone, we hope to kind of bring all of that together. We would like to, bring Nepali program. We'd like to bring spiritual and also history. How much of history do we know, of Nepal? There's wonderful things in our past that are not taught as in depth, and we would like to bring those history series. There's a lot we can do, and I know these dialogues would need to go further. So we only schedule this program for an hour. I know you probably have all prior commitments, but I would like to address these questions and discussions further. So don't be surprised if you see invitation for a second series. I think we need to continue this dialogue. And I did not give who else needs to talk on this. Any thoughts on any of the things that we talked about, guys, as a closing, and we can take another 5 minutes to give an opportunity to anybody who has a very pressing thing they want to say that we didn't touch on for this hour today?
What for me, it's not necessarily like pressing, but I think like as you said, we've through this like hour, we've only like touched the surface of what it means to be Nepalese and just like our identity. But I think what's most important to take away from it is just the fact that we're in control of like what we think of ourselves, right? And everyone kind of goes on a journey, and everyone has different journeys of like finding who they are and finding kind of self-love as well. And so I think that there are some people that will suppress their identity or suppress like the Nepalese side in themselves, and I can't really blame them, because I think that once again it's a journey, right? But I think once people realize that the benefits of being from two different cultures and like seeing these two different sides, I think that it's gonna be a lot better for everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Deepta. Anyone else?
I just want to say that this has been a very good discussion, I think, and there's definitely more to talk about, more. And just having a community where other people who are also Nepali I can relate to. I know we're all in different places, we've had different journeys, but we all are Nepali, and it's helpful to talk to other people who are Nepali, because sometimes in areas where there's not many people who are like me, I find comfort in those who are exactly like me, who know what it means to be Nepali. So I've really appreciated this discussion. So thank you for organizing this.
Thank you, Simona. And I would like to let everybody know that Drishtikone is an open platform, that we would like to encourage these discussions. If anybody who would like to even host, and bring a program forth, any topics that you think needs to be addressed, please reach out to us. This is supposed to let these platforms supposed to allow these dialogues to happen. We started it, we definitely just don't own it. We would like everybody to take ownership and bring their dialogues forward. I would like this platform to be used for that reason. So reach out to me if you have any topics that you need to discuss on, and people that you would like to bring on who would be wonderful, speakers on those topics. We open doors. So with that said, please also let your friends know about the channel. And let us, support us through your likes and shares, and also keep the dialogue open, and reach out to me if you have any topics of your interest. I know we didn't take any questions from the audience. I would like to make that format possible in our future programs, but right now we don't have enough support to do that. So with that said, thank you everyone for being part of today's talk, and we will definitely continue this dialogue on, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yep.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.